Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Mind-Boggling Concepts in the Torah. As per usual, put down any sharp objects and don't get too close to the camera. We don't want to spread any of those diseases. We are galloping through the Torah after 5 years. No, I'm joking. After a significant amount of time, we got to the remarkable spot of chapter 2, verse 15. We're right in the middle of the Garden of Eden, slowly uncovering some phenomenal concepts. So let's just jump right into it. Verse 15. You want to read Yehiel?
Sure.
This is verse 15.
Vayakach
Right,
Hashem Elokim
Hashem, God took the man,
Vayanichehu Bagan Eden La'avda Ul Shamra.
right, and he led him through the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. Yitzav Hashem Elokim, and God gave man a commandment, saying, from all the trees of the garden you should surely eat. Me'etz das, but from the tree of knowledge of good and bad, do not eat from it. Ki b'yom achlecha, from the day you eat from it, you will certainly die. Right? Now this creates a tremendous issue, which leads to Adam's downfall, as we're going to see more in detail, but we should raise it here, because as soon as God says that, it forces a question upon Adam, and which is going to be Eve too, which is why. As soon as you say to somebody, don't eat the bananas, or don't sit on a blue chair, whatever you say, it doesn't matter, right? It forces the recipient to ask to the person who you're commanding. A negative command always produces a question. Why? A positive command also produces, but it is not as forceful. Telling somebody, if you tell your kids, eat this pill or have a glass of water or eat your breakfast, it doesn't evoke the same kind of question. But as soon as you tell them, whatever you do, don't drink the milk or whatever it happens to be, that forces them without a possibility of negation. They can't ignore it. They have to ask the question, why? And that is where Adam is going to mess up, because there's only two possibilities. No, there's only two possibilities of why God doesn't want them to eat it. There's only two possibilities. You're going to go one or the other.
That he knows it's bad for them.
Right. One is that it's bad for them. In other words, when God says, don't eat from it or you will die, he means because it's poisonous and you're going to die. Right? And just as if you tell your children, whatever you do, right? You're a doctor and you bring home some medicines for whatever reason, you put it on the kitchen table, and you say to the kids, whatever you do, don't eat the pills. Right? You follow? So if you're a bit more explicit and say, because you'll die, right? that leads them to the question, right? Am I going to die because they're poisonous? And what's the second possibility?
Are you just trying to fool me? It's really good and
Well, assuming that you're not fooling them, although Chazal do say that is the message that the snake tried to give to them, but let's not go there yet, at least yet. But initially, the second answer is because I'll kill you. It's one of those two possibilities. It's only those two possibilities. Either when God says you'll die because it's poisonous, right? Or you'll die because I'll kill you. Which is not so difficult to understand. There are lots of mitzvahs in the Torah that God threatens death if you disobey. So that's not difficult to understand. We can understand that there are consequences to life and its mitzvahs. But those are the two possibilities. They're the only two possibilities. And Adam is forced into discerning which one is the right answer. Unfortunately, he gets it wrong.
who gets it wrong?
Adam gets it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, he comes to the conclusion that it's because God's going to kill him. That's the wrong answer, right? Sorry. And the rest is history. But once he's concluded that it's because that's going to change his behavior. We are products of how we think life is treating us, or the rules of existence. So that's going to dictate what he's going to do. It's all going to become clear as we go through it. But anyway, that's initially what we're dealing with, right? So then we get to the very strange next verse, completely, at least seemingly, out of context. Verse 18, God says the very famous line, V'yomer Hashem Elokim, and God said, Lo tov ha'ayot ha'adam levado. It's not good for man to be alone. Eser lo ezer keneta. I shall make for him a helpmate. Now, this is strange for a number of reasons. Number one is, why is God explaining his need for creating Chava? In other words, we could have just skipped verse 18, right? Gone to verse 21. God made man fall into deep sleep and made a woman, and we would not have suspected anything was awry. But because God says it's not good for man to be alone, we now have a basis, an understanding of why Eve was created, Chava was created. Right? There's something amiss. Now, this statement, it's not good for man to be, is strange indeed, because it shouldn't be here. It sort of implies that, remember, the very last thing that God creates, we're on the sixth day of creation, just before Shabbos, the very last thing that he creates is this Adam. Once Shabbos hits, that's it. No more creation. We're done. If it doesn't get in before Shabbos, it's like a government contract. If you don't spend when they give you a government grant, the rule is spend it or lose it, I think it is the expression, right? If you don't spend everything in your budget, you're not going to get it back next year. So, but this is the budget. This week is the week of creation, and that's it. You don't make anything this week. We're not picking up the tool chest next week. We're done, right? God's going to come tinker around a little bit, right? A lightning bolt here, an earthquake there, but the fundamentals of creation are done by Shabbos. And here we get to the very last thing, Adam, and then God says, oops, we need a woman. What was I thinking? Right? It's not good for man to be alone, which sounds like up until now, he thought that it was good for man to be alone, which is exactly true. He did think it was good for man to be alone. But now God realizes it's not going to work. Right? Very strange indeed. In other words, if you read the verses like you should, that is the conclusion you're going to have to come to. Right? So what happens that Adam, that God comes to God says it's not good for man to be alone. Now, I should add that we know the story. That we really should, when you're learning Torah, one of the ways to learn Torah is you have to assume you don't know how the story is going to end. Right? You've got to be in the moment of the story up until now. In other words, whatever you've been learned up until now is what you need to know for the present pasuk, for the present verse. You can't read the story of Joseph and know that he ends up being the king. At the time when he's thrown into prison, it's the end. It's a disaster. Oh my goodness! You can't read it with the not ended in sight. But we're going to cheat a little bit, and we're going to read ahead, and we're going to know, right, what Eve makes Adam do. And she's the one convinced by the snake to make Adam eat from the fruit that God told him not to eat from. Right? So when it says it's not good for man to be alone, that's a very strange thing, because it was very good. He only had one mitzvah, one thing he cannot do. That's it. Right? All you got to do is not eat from this tree. That's it. You can do anything you want. You can have a great time. Life is perfect. You're in the Garden of Eden. You're being fed by angels themselves. Right? You're strolling with God. All the mysteries of existence are right there. God, you can talk about quantum mechanics and physics and how frogs become toads and all kinds of tadpoles and all kinds of that, whatever. Right? And just got one thing you got to be careful of. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge. That's it. And who makes him eat? Hava. What do you mean it's not good for man to be alone? It's very good that he be alone. There is no mitzvah to be fruitful and multiply. We're doing great. Everything is wonderful, right? We're having a great life, right? I mean, if there is a mitzvah, if there is a mitzvah to be fruitful and multiply, somehow it's going to work out, right? So what on earth does it mean it's not good for man to be alone?
And it comes right after the warning about the
Right. So obviously that is the thing that spurred this reality, this new change in reality. That now it's not good for man to be alone. It was good for man to be alone, but now it's not. And rather than Eve being the one that destroyed the world, she's the one that saves Adam. So let's understand this. So when it says it's not good for man, so when God says, when God says, don't eat from the tree of knowledge, the day you eat from the tree of knowledge, you'll die, right? Adam had three choices. What were his three choices?
Eat, don't eat, or do nothing.
Eat from the tree of knowledge, one, right? What's his other choice?
Or eat from the tree of life.
Eat from the tree of life, or what's his third choice?
Or do nothing.
Right. Now the Christians have it that the worst choice was to eat from the tree of knowledge. We don't hold of such an idea. The worst choice was something very different. What was that?
Do nothing.
Do nothing. That's what it means. God gave him a choice. He put the tree of knowledge and the tree of life in front of him. And he said, whatever you do, don't eat from the tree of knowledge. You follow? And what does he do? He does nothing. Now, the Torah ends with the same message. Moses comes and he says, see today, in Devarim, see today that I put before you life, the tree of life, and death, the tree of knowledge. And there Moses says, choose life. God can't tell Adam to choose life because he's got to do it on his own. It would have been an imperative. When Moses says it's not an imperative, it's a good idea. It's telling you, take my advice. So God can't tell him that. But he puts in front of me the two choices, and what does Adam do? Nothing. The worst choice. The worst choice.
How do we know he doesn't eat from the tree of life?
Because the Torah doesn't need to tell you when someone doesn't do anything. They just don't do anything. That's it. If he would have done anything, he would have done it. But he didn't. Now, why is that the worst choice? Because you can't help somebody who doesn't make choices. Doing the wrong thing isn't the worst thing in Torah. Doing nothing is the worst thing. That is the message of Tisha B'Av. It's the one sin that God can't forgive us for, of not going into the land of Israel, because he can't forgive you for not doing something. There's nothing to do. If you go into the land of Israel and you mess it up, I can help you. We can fix that. But I can't fix nothing. I can't fix apathy.
That's why God made Hava, because
God made Hava. Because unlike the Western Hollywood concept, women are the real proactive actors of existence. They are the people, they are the species that get things done. Men are the passive of existence. They much prefer not doing anything. And if they have to pretend that they're doing anything, it's going to be things that don't need to be done. Dennis Prager makes this point, that it's Christianity that civilized the West. Now, obviously, Christianity and any of the good that it has in it comes from Jewish ideas, but it's Christianity because up until then, the pagans didn't take marriage seriously. They got married, but it was a very loose relationship. That's why the Catholics came in and they went to the other extreme. They said, you can't divorce for any reason. They felt that they had to do that to civilize humanity because it was out of control. And you see, as Christianity has lost its grip on Western man, it's getting out of control again, right? With nuts and craziness and all kinds of ridiculous, right, behaviors. So the problem with that is the end of civilization, because marriage civilizes humanity. When you have to listen to your wife, you operate on a different level. It's very hard to rape and pillage the village next door when you have to tell your wife what you did. Right? So men, as I said, they don't make decisions. They don't do anything. Nothing personal. Some of my best friends are men. What you think is doing something is nonsense. Building a spaceship to go to Mars is nonsense. It's just distraction. It's avoiding the real decisions in life, which is talking to your neighbors, talking to your friends, talking to humanity, working out your issues. Men would much rather kill their next door neighbor than they would working out with them or apologize or figure it out. Right? Women are the civilizers of humanity. They force you to, I mean, these are huge generalizations, and you'll find women who do the opposite, men who do the opposite, but this is the species in general. As Rav Yaakov Weinberg at Soul said, is there may be a man who invented a washing machine, but he did it for a woman. Up until really the middle 19th century, men invented things to kill other men. The economies of the world were driven by war. It's only when marriage took a different took a more central place in society, and the needs of women became more front and center for whatever reason, that we had a consumer economy. It was an absurd idea in like the 18th century, even much of the 19th century, right? To build consumer products. You couldn't run an economy on such a thing. It was all the big spenders with the army. So she's the one that forces Adam to make a decision. True, not the best decision, but a decision from which we can learn from which we can grow, from which we can perfect ourselves from. And that's been the rest of history. Right? When God says it's not good for man to be alone, right? It doesn't mean from a woman. Why is it not good? Because it doesn't make a decision. But alone from whom, though? It doesn't mean from a woman. That's another big misnomer.
Alone from his obligations.
That's good. I like that. Very creative. You see, there's only two people in the whole universe. When God said it's not good for man to be alone from the other person, who's that?
Two people in the whole universe?
Yes.
Before how it was created?
Loosely. What?
I guess Hashem.
Hashem. Right? When God says not good, so what did he do? He cut the man in half and put them back together again. That is an old accounting trick. You don't have more money because you put all the same amount in two different bank accounts. If you think you do, you need to speak to somebody. Right? So what do you mean alone? Alone from God. It's not good for man to be alone from God. Why is he alone from God?
Because he didn't listen, didn't do what God asked him to do.
He didn't. He didn't. He wasn't breaking anything. God didn't tell him to eat from the Eitz Chaim. He just said, "Don't eat from the Eitz Das, the tree of knowledge." He wasn't doing anything. That was the problem. You can't have a relationship with God or anybody unless you make choices. You have to make choices. It's not good for man to be alone from God. As again, Moshe says later in Deuteronomy, right? That man cannot live on bread alone. What does he need? A relationship with God.
And only can have a relationship by making choices.
You can only have a relationship by making choices. That's right. Your wife makes you make choices.
Yeah.
You don't want to make those choices. It's painful to make those choices. You'd rather avoid. Right? That's why men who don't listen, or single men, they spend their days at buying cars or gardening or business or whatever. Okay, very good. To be continued. Thanks, Yichel.
Thank you very much.
You're
Shabbat
welcome.
shalom. Bye-bye.
Shabbat shalom.